we've been able to have gender specifically rectified as well. And it is a great opportunity for us to have this discussion. In as much as we are looking at Ghana's best practices, we also will be willing to learn from other countries and other partners as well on what they are also doing. And today at COP, as a Youth Day, it shows the power of young people. Last year was the first time that there was a children and youth pavilion. And this year, we've seen a lot of activities of young people at these pavilions. And for the government of Ghana and the Ghana Pavilion to give us this day to have an engagement, to have such a discussion, I think it's a welcoming news. And to the young people out there, as some of us are facing out of the youth space, I would like to advise all of us to grab the opportunity, not just being part of the numbers, but to make such opportunity count, right? Because when you call for young people to be on the table, young people must come with content. They must show why they are there. Young people are the future. And since we have this day, I wish to advise all of us, encourage all of us, and inspire all of us that we should make all these priceless moments count. And at COP here to make sure you spread your wings. Yesterday, I learned something that you might have wings, but you might not be able to fly. But have wings, spread them out, and fly and soar very high. So this is my message, and I would like to thank all of you here and wishing all of us a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yamwa, for that very inspiring remarks on the Youth Day here at COP28. So briefly, I'm going to invite our panelists, who are basically young people from Ghana. We have one who is into the climate negotiations, following the loss and damage agenda. And then we also have one who works with young people and children in Ghana. And so we are going to invite them. And then we're also looking forward to be joined by the lead coordinator on the National Adaptation Planning process, Dr. Nchi Boisiako in the process. But I want everybody to take a look. If this is my left, then it's your right, right? So look at your right. As you can see, we have Ghana's adaptation process that has been beautifully, explained for us to be able to grasp as to what the country is doing when it comes to adaptation. And for us as Africans, adaptation is very crucial and it's very critical, because while there continues to be conversations around whether we should phase out or we should phase down fossil fuel, there are still communities that are living with the brunt of the impact of the climate crisis. This is why it's important that every African country is able to develop the plans, to be able to help their local communities and their national governments and their cities to be able to adapt to the impacts of the climate crisis. And if we are talking about young people taking leadership, then there's no better way than in these processes, we give them also the opportunity for their voices to be heard and for them to also be part of the process. Since they are going to be around for a very long time, or we are going to be around to bear the brunt of the crisis, then it's important that we are part of the action to ensure that communities are able to, adapt. So quickly, and then also please take notes that if you have colleagues who are interested and they are not here, the event is also streaming on the Ghana COP28 website. And so if there are participants online, you're also welcome as well. Today we are sharing best practices from Ghana on how young people are being engaged in the National Adaptation Planning process. But like Mr. Yama also said, we'll give the opportunity for other people who have joined us from other countries to also share with us how young people are being engaged in their planning and implementation of climate change policies and programs in their respective countries. So our first panelist is a head of communications at EcoCare Ghana, and she's also one of Ghana's young negotiators on loss and damage, Ms. Evelyn Addo. Please help me welcome her with a big round of applause. We also have our very own SYND's lead on the Children for Climate Action Project, Mr. Jacob Safudankwa. Oh, sorry. He said it's just Safo Dankwa. I shouldn't add Jacob. Okay. And so, like I mentioned earlier, we are expecting to have Dr. Inchibo Siakun Amwa, who is the lead coordinator on Ghana's National Adaptation Planning process, join us in the course of the discussion. But it's still a good opportunity for us to engage the young people that are here on how best they are being engaged or they've been involved in the development of Ghana's National Adaptation Plan so far. So welcome, Evelyn and Safo, and it's a pleasure to have you all here. Thank you for coming. Okay, I hope you can hear me. Great. Okay, so welcome once again, Safo. But because there are people here who do not really know about the work that you do, even though I've briefly introduced you, can you tell us in 1 minute, tell us about yourself and the work that you are doing in Ghana?
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Safo Dankwa. I like to be called Safo Dankwa. It's that way that I want it. I lead on Children for Climate Action at the Strategic Youth Network for Development. I co-lead on the National Youth in Leadership and Adaptation Project, and also all at the Strategic Youth Network for Development, and also a co-lead for 10 Billion Strong Ghana Hub, which is an environmental leadership organization. So basically working with children and young people, engaging them on climate action, engaging them on environmental sustainability initiatives to ensure that we have more young people and more of the children in schools being a part of this agenda, because it's very important that our environment is kept the way it is to ensure that we stay on a livable planet. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Safo. Evelyn.
So my name is Evelyn Ado. I work with EcoCare Ghana. EcoCare Ghana is a right-based organization that works mostly in the forestry area. We work with vulnerable communities, trying to support them to adapt and build climate resilience. We also have a project in landscape restoration. So we are restoring lands in degraded farmlands in the Techiman transition landscape area. We also work with cocoa farmers, building their capacity and supporting them to be more resilient to climate change, and also supporting them to demand for their rights and pushing for living income for cocoa farmers. I work as the communications officer for EcoCare Ghana, where I support the development of communications strategies and engagement strategies for the organization. Also, I'm one of Ghana's young negotiators that was trained last year. I follow loss and damage and also ACE. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. And so, Safo, today is Youth Day, and as you see over the years, there has been, active call for young people to also be center of the discussions when it comes to global climate change discourse. And then particularly talking about how adaptation is important for us as Africans. Why is this so essential for young people to be involved in processes like the National Adaptation Plan process?
Um, in one word, the reason why or why it's so essential for young people to be involved in the national adaptation process, in one word, I would just say sustainability. Sustainability, because if you're expecting a program to be long term, then you should be able to get people who will be in that project for quite a long time. And many times when we talk about sustainability, many people think it's just about the resources and how we use them wisely and not affect and not destroy the environment. But let's also remember that young people are resources in their own way. We have human resources on that tangent, thinking on that tangent, because if young people are resources, then you should know that they are the ones who are actually going to carry the future. So if we will mention that it's so essential for them to be part of the national adaptation planning processes is because of sustainability. Secondly, I would say that um, national governments are part of signatories all over the world, especially if you look at Africa, we are part of the African Youth Charter. And for Article 11, it mentions that young people need to participate in every sphere of society, and the government is also responsible to getting them roped in. For Article 12 of the same charter, it mentions that the national governments in Africa, so to speak, have the responsibility to develop national youth policies. And the national youth policies are supposed to productively engage the young people. So if that is the case, then it's very essential that young people are engaged. It's very essential that they are roped in the planning process to ensure sustainability, to ensure that their needs are addressed, because young people in their own way are vulnerable. So if they are not their needs are not well taken care of, it means that we are going to eventually, ideally, have a ghost country, because the older generation will phase out and the young people will come up. So if their capacity is not built, then it means that we are doing much harm than good to ourselves. So essentially, it's very important that young people are included in national adaptation processes.
Thank you very much, Safo, for highlighting that. But also, so Evelyn, if you look at also Africa, where we have a very youthful population, right? And Safo has rightly mentioned that we are also resources, right? We are one of, Africa's most reliable resources, I would say. What is our role in processes such as the National Adaptation Planning?
Thank you so much, Pat. So for us as young people in Africa, we are the most vulnerable people to climate impact. And as vulnerable as we are needed to be part of the solution. How do we survive the climate crisis? So we have to be part of the solution. And so for me, I think the role of young people, I'll take it from two angles: the issue of policy and then the issue of action. So when young people are included in the policy making process, such as the NAP process that we are currently involved in, it really helps us to take ownership of the policy when it is completed. We can say that we were part of the process, we were consulted, and we were able to give input into the outcome of the policy, so we can own it and take it to other young people and tell them this is Ghana's plan. But if we are not consulted, it means that we can't take ownership of it. And I must applaud the EPA for giving us opportunity from the onset when they started the process. I remember in 2019 when the NAP process started, as young people in the Youth NREC platform, we wrote to the EPA that we wanted to understand what the process is, and they gave us the opportunity to meet the coordinator and talk to him. He took us through the process, the various cross-sectorial policy areas. They took us through it, and then they promised us that they are going to include us in the process. And actually, they honored their word. So young people are sitting on each of the 5 cross-sectorial policy area. We've been involved in the MNE of the process. So now we can say that we've been actively included, and we know the possible outcomes of the process when it's concluded. So it gives us that sense of ownership when it is done. And then also the second part is the action part. Because we are involved in the process, we are able to take the policy outcomes and engage other young people with it. And if you can look at, like, those of us from Ghana, if you can see, a lot of young people are now interested in coming into the climate space. There are a lot of green entrepreneurs coming up because we've been involved in the process. We've had several. We go back and have a youth constituency that we report to and teach them what adaptation is. And so you see a lot of innovation coming up. And so these are the two places that I'll take it from being part of the enacting of the policy and also taking ownership of it, and then taking action as a result of being part of it. So I think that is the most important role that young people
Interesting.
play.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. I very much agree with our capacity or our capability to be able to take ownership of these policies when we are, rightfully engaged and consulted and being part of the process. But I'll still come back to you. How would you describe the process so far? Because like you mentioned, it started from somewhere, and then Dr. Nju will hopefully give us, the progress, where it started and how far we've come, even though we can also see a brief description of the process, the entire process on the wall. How would you describe how inclusive the process has been up to this point?
I think it has been quite inclusive. I think from the very onset, even before the adaptation plan started happening, we were educated on what it is, what is adaptation and all that. And we were consulted and given a seat on all the five cross-sectorial policy groups. So young people are part of the planning in each of the cross-sectorial policy groups. I think we have five: infrastructure, health, I can't mention all right now, but young people are there making input into the plan. And then we've also been part of the vulnerability assessment that was conducted across some of the selected districts. Young people in the various districts were consulted. And after that, young people were also, the report from the vulnerability assessment, young people were consulted and they reported back to us on the outcomes of those assessments that they did. And we've also been part of I want to remember the correct word, the projection. They did this district's projection on how climate change is going to affect, I think, Tamale and then Sekendi Takra. They were part of it. We made input into it. And so the process has not ended yet. So it's still an ongoing process, and we've been part of it from every step of the way. And this gives us a lot of pride as young people, because we are able to speak and from the young people's perspective and look forward and tell them some of the technology that we are expecting, some of the development that we are expecting in terms of infrastructure and all that. So being part of the process has been really good. And it has also built our capacity very, very much. For me, personally, being part of such a policy process gave me more confidence and desire to really explore how I can be useful in the policy space. And so beyond national policy making, also seeking to go to the international level and developing my skills in international negotiations and being part of the negotiation process. So being part of the national process has really encouraged a lot of young people. And if you see this year's Ghana's delegation, we had a lot of young negotiators who has also been part of developing national policies and are seeking to explore at the international level as well. So
Thank you very much, Evelyn, for sharing that. Indeed, I think it's very commendable. That's why we are doing this event. That right from the onset of the process, when we wrote to the EPA, they welcomed us and they have also given us representation in the policy cross-sectorial policy working groups to be able to develop the national adaptation planning process. Now, Safo, you also co-lead the Youth in Leadership and Adaptation project, right? So with such a project and also with the ongoing process like Ghana's National Adaptation Planning process, what are some of the unique opportunities in this process for young people? And also tell us a little bit more about the Youth in Leadership and Adaptation projects in Ghana.
Okay, right. I'll start with the opportunities. And I'll start by connecting it with what Evelyn said. I mean, being part of a national adaptation process, I see it as a very big win for young people. Not one to really say that you overly pride yourself in being part of such a thing, but humbly saying that you are adding your voice, your strength to making Ghana better for other young people. So majorly the opportunity starts from that. And then secondly, I would say that your capacity is going to be built when you are part of this process. Being part of the cross-sectorial policies that she mentioned, being part of consultations that will definitely come up when the process is still ongoing, and making sure that the voices of other young people all around is included in the process, I think your capacity will be built, your knowledge will be increased. Who knows? I think that you may even find a business venture from it, because personally speaking, when I started, I was just seeking to really understand all about climate change, all about environmental sustainability. The first time I heard about the NAPs, the NDCs, I would say that something just jumped out of me. I just wanted to know more about it, because it felt that, okay, if all these things are there, why is it that our environment is still the way it is? Why is it that things are getting badder, if there is anything like that? Why is it that things are still messed up in a way? And I've seen that as my capacity has been built, I'm making strides. Now, the second part of the question that talks about um, what we are doing about the National Youth in Leadership Adaptation Project is to make sure that ultimately we come out with, in partnership with the EPA, we come out with a youth adaptation strategy, which will be a component of the NAPS. So in doing so, we are going to, I think from this particular event, this side event, we are going to ensure that we consult young people all around Ghana. Of course, we can't consult all the young people in Ghana, but we have representations in these regions, in the regions. We decide to use the three ecological zones, the northern, the middle, and then the southern, so that in consulting the youth groups or the youth representatives in these ecological zones, they would also present the needs of young people concerning adaptation. And together with the EPA, we strategize to ensure that solutions are developed, so that even before future impacts of climate change occur, we would have thought about it. So we want it to be a before thought, not an afterthought solution, because already we are experiencing a lot of climate change impact, and we can't wait till it happens for us to react. We need to be proactive about it, so that we don't even lose more and then spend more than in trying to solve it when it happens. So that's about it. So after the original consultations, then we will have more meetings and more consultations with the EPA to ensure that it's done properly. Then after that, we have a validation workshop to fully allow the acceptance of such a document to be incorporated in the National Adaptation Plans. Yes.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Safo. And so please, if you just join us, this is an engagement of young people from Ghana together with the NAP Projects Unit at Environmental Protection Agency, for us to discuss some best practices on how young people have been engaged in the development of the National Adaptation Planning so far. And then we also have the lead coordinator on the process so far, Dr. Inchibo Siakun, who has just joined us, and he's also going to tell us about the process and why they thought it was very essential for them to involve the young people in Ghana in such a process. So you're welcome, Doc, and we know you're very busy, but thank you very much for taking time to join us today. And congratulations for your role as the co-facilitator for the NAP process. And so, Doc, we want you to walk us through the progress so far when it comes to the NAP process in Ghana.
Thank you so much, Patience. Good morning to everybody. And apologies for also being late. I was in a different meeting as well. So my job here this morning is to, sorry, explain to you the processes that the National Adaptation Planning for Ghana goes through. I'm sure my colleague who just spoke has already talked about the relevance of the NAP process, and the fact that if there's anything that developing countries must prioritize, then it's adaptation planning when it comes to adaptation. Because that actually takes you into the development space where the medium-term plans, the long-term plans are aligned with climate action. And so it's a very important process. I don't know whether we are paying so much attention to this with other things surrounding. Yes, it's good to have green energy, it's good to have that and that and that, but if rainfall is affecting the people that are depending on agriculture in diverse ways, if flooding is distorting infrastructure, if high temperatures are also distorting growth, then it means that we need to pay attention to how adaptation is planned. And so that is the starting point. It is a UN process, it's a UNFCCC process. It is having different layers. There's a ground laying layer, which is the first layer. I'll explain each layer quickly. And then the second layer has to do with the development of the plan by itself. And then the third element of the process is to develop a monitoring framework and then reporting framework. And then finally, this process has to be feeding back into the first phase. So it's an iterative process. In all those stages, you need to prioritize communication, you need to prioritize gender, you need to prioritize data and information. So these processes, all of them, whichever stage that you get to. The first stage, which is the ground laying stage, is very important. Why is it important? It's important because this is where you set up the institutional structures that are going to be part of the process. So what kind of sectors, stakeholders are you going to engage? As part of the institutional process, you also have to get the needed sectors that you want to work with because you can't do everything. Resources are limited, and therefore, as a country, you need to prioritize which sectors that your first national adaptation plan is going to focus on. So it's part of the ground laying process. Another critical part of that process is conducting studies and assessment to know the gaps and then also the entry point where the adaptation plans can be done. So each phase, as I said, is very important. Ghana is working with what we call cross-sectoral policy groups for the national adaptation planning process. It is cross-sectoral because it's bringing on board all stakeholders, private sector, government institutions, civil society organizations, youth groups, and so on and so forth. Since the emphasis is on the youth, I think I will narrow down to the role of the young people in this process. In setting up the structures, we made sure that each of the 5 working groups, we have for health, we have for agriculture and forestry, we have for infrastructure, which is energy, water, transport, and so on and so forth. And then we also have for cities and disaster risk. All these groups that I mentioned, we made sure that youth are represented in each of their groups. It is only the youth, gender, and then planning that are part of all the 5 working groups because at any point in time, this is a national adaptation plan. So the NDPC must be part of all the groups. The young people needs to be represented in all the groups. And then also when it comes to gender, gender has to also feature in all the working groups. Apart from that, after having part of this consultative process, what substantively can the young people do? So I had an engagement with the SYND and other youth networks as to how we can have their involvement in. So we engaged, and then with a quest from them saying that it is not enough, which I agreed. So the question that kept on coming to me that, Doc, how can we be part of the process? Then I kept on responding the same response that you are with the working groups, you are being consulted. Then they said, no, we still want to be part of the process. So look, then I suggested that then they should have a youth strategy to be part of the implementation plan of the adaptation plan. If they do that, then they can be sure that they have their component in the process which they have to support the country in implementing. So this actually brought this issue of national consultation with the young people. And so they accepted it in good faith, and then they have started their consultation. The product from this consultation will be their own strategy, which is going to be incorporated into the national plan so that when we implement, we'll have all-encompassing document that brings every stakeholder on board. I think I'll end here for the process. Yeah.
Please, let's give Doc a round of applause. Thank you very much. And then we are very grateful that you always open your doors for us to be engaged in the process. But Safo, so with the developments of the strategy, how do we ensure that we are continuously engaged in this process? Not just even with the NAVs, but the other process, countrywide, because this serves as a good example like we are saying today, we are sharing best practices from Ghana. It's not always that we have to say government is not giving us access, government is not doing this. So for the good things that we also have in country, it's very important that we also share it for the rest of the. And then as the conversation goes on, we're also going to, have a discussion with our audience. If there are people from other countries that also have some of these practices to share, we are going to also share that. So how do we continue to engage, together as young people in some of these processes?
Wow. Okay. I see this in two ways, and I'll start with young people engaging government. For a very long time, I think the perception about young people is that they make a lot of noise because they have a lot of energy, and that when they want to get things done, they want to exert their energy with their voice as well and demand that it has to be done now, self-government now. They don't want it within the shortest possible time. And it's been like that for a very long time. So if the narrative has to be changed, then it means that young people will have to then channel their energy into speaking the currency of national governments or other authorities. And if I say speaking the currency, it means that, for example, if I have to go and see Dr. Entry, I can't go shouting. I can't go flexing my muscles and say that he should do this A, B, C, D for me. I have to go and speak his language. And Dr. Entry's language has to do with policies. So if I go and then flex my mental muscles and say, Dr. Entry, A, B, C, D, National Youth, National Adaptation Plans, we want to be part of this, and so. We organize a workshop, he comes, he engages us, and then we ask questions, intelligent questions, of course. And in the long run, we take a picture with him, and he also being someone who loves young people, I think we'll be getting him, so to speak, in our pockets in a way. Because you see, I've realized that if you are going to agree or work with people on certain things, you need to speak their language. You need to be on the same working ground, common ground with them, understanding. And so if that's the case, then I would say that young people have to persistently and continuously go to the focal points of certain departments, ministries, agencies to ensure that the plans of probably climate change programs or other developmental plans in their countries are implemented. If I say that, I also want to add the fact that sometimes there may be rejection, but you don't stop. You need to go with your best foot forward, with your unique selling proposition, that you have substance, you have content, you know what they are talking about. And this is what you are also seeing as an entry point, as your support to implementing it. But then if you are standing aloof and then always criticizing and never being part of the solution, then definitely they are going to look at you with a third eye, that you are being so critical with no solution. But I believe that if you go as the solution, present yourself as the solution, and then ensure that you are supporting, even if there is a dent somewhere. I mean, it's accepted. We are human beings and we are not entirely right. We are not entirely good too. So I can say that for that matter, everybody is allowed to make mistakes, but we are here to unite, act, and deliver, as the theme for COP28 is saying. So we have to continuously, as young people, engage the respective ministries, departments, agencies. We identify those who are actually leading the process to get to connect with them and ensure that when we go there, we have substance and we know what we are talking about, not to go empty-handed or empty-minded and then not really know what we are doing. So that is what I can add to it. But then on the second point, I would say that Dr. Entry and the other deputy directors of EP are also doing exceptionally well, because anytime you go to them, their doors are open, and then many times too, they would also reach out to you. So on the other hand, I would say that ministries, focal points of ministries, department agencies should also take their step to reaching out to young youth groups that are also working and ensure that what we are seeking for is ultimately achieved. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Safo. Evelyn, representation is very key. So I'll just ask the same question I shoot to Safo. How do we ensure that as young people from the global south, we continue to engage in some of these processes? Sorry. So I was talking about representation in the global discourse, right? How do we continue to push and engage as young people, especially from the global south, to ensure that our perspective and our voices are also heard in some of these global spaces?
Thank you so much, Pat. So for me, I think it's all start from our willingness to learn. As young people, sometimes we are believed to lack capacity. And yes, sometimes we lack capacity. So we have to be willing to learn, go to the extra mile, and understand what it takes to be part of the policy process. Whatever you are interested in within the policy process, whether adaptation or mitigation, whatever it is, there is so much information online that you can go to and read, build your capacity, understand it, and then try to build your network and reach out to the right people. Understanding how the system works is really important. So once you understand how the system works in making policy in Ghana, you can know who to contact, who to reach out to, and so that you can be part of the process. And when you are going to the table, when you are given a seat at the table, just take your time. Sometimes just listening alone is enough. Listen and understand the process, and then be able to make constructive contribution to the process. If you're able to do that, you will be invited back time and time and time again to be part of the decision-making process. And when we are, some of us that have been given the privilege to be part of the process, we must be willing to share the knowledge that we are gaining with other young people who are not in the room. And I have to applaud SYND for this. Anytime that there is a meeting at the high level that we are part of it, we are able to also organize a broader youth network where we share what we are learning with other young people. Because as young people, we shouldn't also forget that we are growing. And maybe in the next 4 years, 5 years, some of us will no longer be acknowledged as young people. And so we need to be willing to teach people behind us what we are learning, so that once we leave the space, they are able to come in as soon as possible. And then we must also, beyond asking for a seat at the table, we must be willing to take action on some of the decisions that are being made, some of the policies that are being made. Where can we take advantage of the process? If there is a policy that is encouraging adaptation, where is the business opportunity in adaptation? We must be willing to take action, take part in the business implementation, take part in educating others, take part in building young people's capacity, and be part of the solution.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. So Doc, I'll come back to you, because you mentioned earlier that especially for developing countries, our adaptation plans are something very crucial that we should make sure that every developing country has that, because that affects our people the most. If you are coming up with energy plans and policy and people are dying from flooding, then what exactly are we going to achieve? So when it comes to places like this, how do we as young people add our voices to the work that you are doing in the negotiation rooms to ensure that the things that are very relevant to us as Africans and as developing countries are heard, and are given the needed attention?
Thank you so much. I think there's a saying that charity begins at home. If you really want to influence the global process, you must start from your country. So first of all, you need to be visible in your country space. I think that's the starting point. I have this agenda that I've always been telling you. There are so much entry points that we can take as young people to make sure that we engage meaningfully. And I think the two panelists have articulated them very clearly. There's One Ghana project, and that One Ghana project, the young people are stakeholders in it, so you have a stake in it. And so nobody can stop you from doing or saying the right thing that affects your future and then even what you want to depend on today. And so you need to be confident, you need to be bold, not in maybe grudging manner, but say it as it is. That's why anytime I engage you, I say that there are two big platforms that you have not utilized yet as young people. One of it is what? The political manifesto platform. I have been saying it's a campaign that I am actually trying to make sure that the message goes well. You see people in the country, young people talking about unnecessary things, unnecessary in quote, because they join frayed into things that probably don't support their development. Whether we like it or not, we are in a multi-party democratic system where political parties lead our governance structures. And these parties actually come to power with what? Political manifestos. Anytime there is an election, how do you influence these manifestos with the youth agenda, especially when it comes to what? The environment. I think it's something that we can meaningfully engage the political parties, because their manifestos actually translate into what? Coordinated programs that the NDPC ran for 4-year period and then another 4-year, depending on how many years a political party stays in power. So that's the starting point. Because you can do all the background technical level work. If you don't have the political buy-in, it doesn't actually give you the necessary impact that you want. So I think that's one of the points. The other point is the fact that you need to understand what you are working for. Sometimes we make arguments, we make accusations that are not driving towards the relevant points. So we should understand, and I think the gentleman said it clearly. You need to be able to know where the national agenda is driving at, and then what role you can play. It is a big space. Don't think that the place is full for you. It's like an elephant meat. It's so huge. Some are taking the tail, some are taking the leg, others are taking the head. Wherever you are, there's so much for you to chop because the elephant is big. It's the same thing. The national agenda is huge. And so you have to identify which space that you can make the meaningful impact. And then it will escalate to the global level. So if you can't come into the international level when you have not actually done your homework well. So I think that is what I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. I think, yes, let's give our panelists a resounding round of applause. So at this point, we are going to take any questions and also just give two people the opportunity to share any best practices that they've had also in their countries engaging in the development and implementation of climate change policies and programs. So it can either be a question or if you also want to share some best practices that you are engaging. Because today is the Youth Day, guys. Youth Day. Can I hear some screams, some shouts? Okay. Okay, so if you have any question or if you want to also share the best practice, you can walk up to the stage and we are going to give you the opportunity to also do that. So any question or any contribution from our audience?
Hi. My name's Anna. I'm from Virginia in the United States. And you mentioned that high temperatures and infrastructure was a big concern as far as adaptation. What is your biggest priority, would you say, with adaptation? I know everything is very interconnected, but what would you say is your biggest priority?
So I don't know whether we heard the question. So our biggest priority as far as infrastructure is concerned, I think we have very important social infrastructures like roads, we have schools, we have hospitals in terms of health infrastructure. There are a lot more infrastructures that are very critical, but those that I've mentioned are very, very, very critical for our socioeconomic development. And so roads are linking all the country from different parts of the world. And climate change is impacting on the roads from different angles, either through flooding or through high temperatures that actually affect the lifespan of the road once they are constructed. And so as a country, we are prioritizing road construction, and not just road construction, but what? Resilient roads that will stand the test of the time. When it comes to the health infrastructure, it is also very critical. Bearing in mind the weather conditions that we find ourselves in these continuous days, how do you construct your infrastructure in terms of health to accommodate these changing climate conditions? People are already sick and they are going for medical attention. And so if the hospital environment, for example, does not give the needed support to be wealthy and healthy, then it becomes problematic. So in constructing your health infrastructure, we need to also prioritize that and make sure that they are climate compatible. Again, education is the bone of the development of the country. We have young people from toddler stage to the university levels attending different curricula. How do we actually, as a country, design our education infrastructure? And I'll give you a typical example. In a rural setting where temperatures are too high, and then you are constructing a school for education, you don't consider the environment and making sure that ventilation, for example, will be so much that the design will accommodate the warm temperature so that when these kids are studying during the hot day, they can have enough air into the rooms. Learning will be affected. The teacher will be tired, will be sweating. Children will not have the brain to actually accommodate or whatever is being taught in the class. So there are a lot of things that probably we have not paid attention to in our designs. And I think this is important so that as a country, we are mindful of these things. There are a number of them that maybe time will not allow us to talk about. So I think I will just give this as an example. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other question? If not, so we'll take our concluding remarks from our panelists. So, Safo, few days to the end of COP, do you have any expectations that haven't been met yet? So that will be your concluding remarks. And anything interesting that we should look out to with the projects that you are doing back home?
I think this is the most difficult question I've heard being asked to me since I came to the panel. But what I'm looking ahead in the next few days, well, I hope for the best and not expect the worst. I intend to use any opportunity that I find on this ground to the best of my potential. And for other exciting things that we'll be doing for the National Youth in Leadership and Adaptation Project is that, well, I'm excited that we'll be engaging other young people to hearing the different perspectives and then the different adaptation needs that really concern them. I just can't wait for these regional consultations. Yeah, so that's one exciting thing I would like to share with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Safo. Evelyn, you can tell us more about the loss and damage, how it's going so far after the pledges, and then anything exciting that we should look forward to next year.
Well, I think for loss and damage, it's been very great. We did a lot of work at the SBs last year at COP, and there was a lot of work done at the SBs. So for us, my dream for coming to COP this year was to make sure that the Santiago network for loss and damage gets fully operationalized and can start its work as soon as possible. And luckily for us, in the negotiations, we had a lot of concession, and most of the things that from the African group perspective we wanted in the Santiago network, such as regional balance and making sure that we can easily access technical assistance from the network, was approved, and most of the other parties agreed with us. So we now have a Santiago network that is fully operationalized we were able to select a host for the Santiago network to start its working. And so going forward, I'm just hoping that the EPA and the Ministry of Environment will put its house together as soon as possible so that Ghana can start assessing technical assistance and for loss and damage that is happening in Ghana. So also the UNDR, which is the United Nations Disaster Risk Organization, that was the one selected to host the Santiago network. And they promised to have their host, their head office in Africa, probably will be in Kenya. And so it will be so easy for us to work with them. And I'm praying that our country takes advantage of the hours of hours of sleepless nights negotiating on this deal. I also followed ACE, which didn't go so well. So for us as young people from Ghana, we actually lobbied to put in finance in the ACE annual summary report, but our developed country parties, they don't want to hear anything about financing ACE. I think they've given us too much when it comes to loss and damage, so they were trying to hold back. We tried so much to get it through the G77 and China, but it didn't go well. And so actually we had no agreement on ACE, and everything has been pushed to the SB. So hopefully we are able to go and get something at the SB on the two items that I negotiated on. But I'm very happy that loss and damage has gone well, and we can start assessing technical assistance. So going forward, for me, it's all about young people identifying our capacities and being willing to learn and taking advantage of some of the opportunities that has been open to us in this space. I always say climate change is a terrible thing and it's going to be a disaster, but also I see a lot of opportunities that climate change is bringing. Climate change forces us to relook at our development and develop in a way that is better than it had been done before. And it's creating a whole new economy, a whole new opportunities for everybody. And if we take our time to look at it critically and not just look at the doom side of it where everybody is going to die eventually if nothing is done, but look at the opportunities that it presents and take advantage of it to rebuild our economy, to rebuild our country, to rebuild our infrastructure, to be resilient, to take advantages of the new businesses, the green businesses that is coming up. Young people, we can develop in such a way that our forefathers didn't dream up, couldn't even imagine. So I'm just encouraging all young people to take our time to look at the opportunities that climate change is presenting so that we can take full advantage of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. And before we take Dr. Inchi's concluding remarks on how the negotiations have gone so far and anything exciting we should be expecting from his end, so I'll also say that this event is hosted by Strategic Youth Network for Development in partnership with the NAP Project Unit at the Environmental Protection Agency. And we thank you all very much for coming. But also, like Doc has mentioned, and our two panelists, it's also important that we continuously engage other young people, not just in Ghana, but even across Africa, because in Africa, our natural resource and environmental governance sector is very essential to our development. And so next year, the Strategic Youth Network for Development is organizing the first ever Africa Youth Conference on Natural Resources and Environmental Governance. That is going to happen between April and May. So also we are counting on you to also spread the word. So if you have other young people in other African countries that also wants to learn about how as young people we can be engaged in the sustainable management of our natural resource and environmental governance sector, then they should also be looking forward to apply and to be part of the conference. And also at the conference, we are not just going to talk, we are going to be showcasing solutions of young people when it comes to the governance of the natural resource and environmental governance sector. So look forward to the Africa Youth Conference on Natural Resources and Environmental Governance Sector that is going to be organized by SYND and the Youth in Natural Resources and Environmental Governance Platform next year. So Doc, now we'll take your concluding remarks.
First of all, I want to commend SYND for this initiative. I think the youth space in Ghana, as far as climate action is concerned, is becoming energizing, and it's something that we need to commend. If I cast my mind back to some years back where we're trying to make sure that all stakeholders come on board, it was little did you find from the young people participating in this space. So I think you need commendation. There's so much action by the young people these days in Ghana from different networks, and we are monitoring, and then we are also willing to be working with you. In terms of the negotiation, I think the first week of negotiation is already ended, as you're all aware. Most of the technical discussions have been either positively or negatively been concluded under the subsidiary bodies. Now, most of the work are being taken to the CMA, the CMP. By this time, if you don't know the CMA, the CMP, then I don't think I can go back. You can see me behind the scenes, and then I'll explain further. So most of the work has been taken to the CMA, the CMP, and then the COP for the next 5 days. Importantly, the GST, which is the global stock take that cut across all sectors of the negotiations, is still being negotiated and is going to be under the CMA. Finance is still lingering, so there are a number of finance items that are also going to the CMA and then the COP. In terms of the global goal on adaptation, which Africa is prioritizing, it is still also in the basket. It hasn't seen any progress since we came. It's been back and forth negotiation. So it's been taken over by the presidency. I don't know his plan because I was in the meeting when they were having the plenary, then I have to come here. So I'm sure by the next hour or two, we'll be able to see the next line of action for the GJA. And then Article 6 also has some items that are still being negotiated at the technical level. I think those are some of the things that I can say for now. The others have been concluded. Either they have conclusions or Rule 16. Rule 16 means that there was no agreement by parties, and therefore work is going to be started afresh in the next session. So that's what I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Please, let's give our panelists a resounding round of applause. Thank you all so much. And I think you should also give yourselves another round of applause. Thank you for coming. This has been a session on youth engagement in national adaptation planning processes, where as young people, we shared some best practices from Ghana on how we've been engaged in the process so far. And we are very grateful to you, Dr. Inchi, for taking time off your busy schedule to be part of the discussion, and for the EPA and other ministries for always opening up their doors to engage with us young people in this process. And we are also willing to ensure, we are also open, and we are going to do our best to ensure that we are actively engaged in this process, and not just about us that are represented here, but our platform and the other young people in different parts of the country. So thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you tomorrow. We have another event on energy efficiency and clean cooking, so please do come early and be part of our discussion. Thank you. Please, we are going to take a group photograph.